It started like any other quiet Tuesday morning in our suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where the most exciting thing was the mail truck coming an hour late or someone's lawn sprinklers misfiring. But that illusion of peace shattered for us the moment Karen from the HOA, the one who always wore a visor like she was preparing to referee a tennis match, made it her personal mission to impose her warped sense of community standards on our family. We should have known it would come to this. Karen had a long history of minor tyranny, complaints about garden gnomes, strongly worded letters about holiday decorations, passive-aggressive comments at the annual HOA meetings. But nothing prepared us for what she did to my daughter's guide dog. My daughter, Ella, is 14 years old and blind. She lost her sight at age 8 due to a rare genetic condition. It took us years to find her the right guide dog, a beautiful golden retriever named Maple. Maple wasn't just a helper. She was Ella's eyes, her independence, her freedom. Maple could guide her across crosswalks, lead her around school corridors, help her navigate staircases, and even sense when Ella was overwhelmed. They had trained together intensively for 6 months at a facility that specialized in matching guide dogs to children with vision loss. It was the first time in years that Ella had smiled with that unfiltered joy that we thought we'd never see again. Karen had always sneered at Maple. The first time she saw her, she made a big show of sniffing the air and asking, "Is that dog going to be shedding all over the sidewalks?" We explained calmly that Maple was a licensed service animal and was permitted anywhere Ella went. She didn't respond. Just turned up her nose and muttered something about slippery slopes. Weeks passed, and the tension grew. Karen lodged complaints with the HOA about unsanitary animal waste, even though we always cleaned up after Maple. Then she claimed the dog barked at night, a lie easily disproven, as Maple was trained to be silent unless alerting to danger. The HOA board was initially indifferent, but as Karen amped up her campaign, the tone changed. We received a notice threatening fines if excessive pet disturbances continued. Then came the worst day of our lives. It was around 4 p.m. Ella had just come home from school, and Maple guided her up our front steps. I was still at work, but my wife was inside folding laundry. According to our doorbell camera, Karen approached the front of our house while Ella and Maple were on the porch. She was holding a spray bottle, later identified as a chemical deterrent used to repel animals. Without warning, she walked up and sprayed Maple directly in the eyes and mouth. Ella screamed. Maple stumbled back, yelping in pain, and collapsed onto the lawn. Karen stood there, stone-faced, before turning and walking away. My wife rushed outside, saw Maple convulsing on the grass and Ella crying hysterically. She called 911, not knowing what had been sprayed. The emergency responders came quickly, fire, police, animal control, and treated it as a hazmat incident. Maple was taken to an emergency veterinary hospital. Ella was treated for emotional shock. Our house was cordoned off for nearly 3 hours. Later that evening, we found out that Maple had suffered severe chemical burns to her corneas and esophagus. The vet said the chemical used was a potent mixture intended to repel raccoons and coyotes, not legal for use in residential areas and definitely not safe for domestic animals. Maple would survive, but she would never guide again. Her training, her trust, her instincts, all damaged beyond repair. Ella hasn't spoken much since that day. What triggered the military involvement is where this story turns even more surreal. You see, my brother is a decorated Army officer stationed nearby, and Maple wasn't just any guide dog. She was part of a pilot program developed in coordination with the VA and military canine units, a special initiative that trained service dogs using military-grade behavior protocols to assist both veterans and civilians. Because Maple was technically registered under this Joint Defense Civilian Program, her injury triggered a review by the Department of Defense. Suddenly, our suburban conflict was on a federal radar. Military investigators came to our house. A special unit from the K-9 Behavioral Task Force arrived to assess what happened, treat Maple, and gather evidence. The fact that a civilian had assaulted a military-trained service animal and disabled her meant this wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. It was now potentially a federal offense. Karen, as always, was smug. She told police she was defending the neighborhood from a menacing animal. She claimed she had the right to protect common property. Her exact words. We showed them the footage. It was undeniable. Karen had stalked Maple and Ella, approached them without cause, and sprayed a dog that was doing absolutely nothing wrong. Charges were filed, not just for animal cruelty, but for interfering with a federally registered service animal, a crime punishable by both state and federal law. The HOA, scrambling to distance themselves from her, held an emergency meeting and suspended her from the board. But Karen wasn't done. She began a social media campaign claiming she was the real victim, that she was being harassed by a military-industrial conspiracy, and even hinted that our daughter was faking her disability. That's when the community turned. Neighbors who had previously stayed silent began speaking up. Letters were sent. Rallies were held. Someone chalked a giant heart and Maple's name across the community center steps. Ella's school launched a fundraiser to help sponsor a new guide dog. Even the mayor's office got involved, issuing a public statement condemning acts of violence against service animals and pledging to make our city a safer place for those with disabilities. We're still recovering. Maple is being retired to a quiet home where she can live comfortably. Ella is on a waiting list for another dog, but it could take a year or more. In the meantime, she walks with a cane and only leaves the house when absolutely necessary. Her trust has been shaken, her world made smaller by someone who saw kindness and tried to destroy it. And yet, even in the midst of that cruelty, something unexpected happened. A community began to heal. Not because of an HOA board or neighborhood rules, but because people remembered that decency matters. Because one girl, one dog, and one awful act lit a fire that not even Karen could control. Certainly. Here's an expanded version of part 2 of Why Karen Destroyed My Blind Daughter's Guide Dog and Triggered a Military Emergency, aiming for a dramatic and emotional tone, around 1,000 words long, without any heading. The sun hadn't even crested the rooftops when I got the call. I remember it vividly, the shrill ring cutting through the quiet of my kitchen. I was preparing breakfast, something soft for my daughter, Ava. She had just started warming up to her new guide dog, Scout. He was a golden retriever with eyes that mirrored a quiet intelligence and a sense of duty that somehow surpassed most humans have known. My daughter, blind since birth, had never bonded with a living being the way she had with him. And for the first time, she was beginning to feel a sense of independence. But that call shattered it all. It was our neighbor Mark, a retired firefighter. You need to get down to the community park now, he said, voice strained. It's Scout. There's been an incident, and Karen's involved. I didn't wait for more. I grabbed my keys, yelled to Ava to stay inside, and tore down the street in my car. By the time I got to the park, I saw the small crowd forming, phones out, murmurs swirling. And there, standing at the center of it all, was Karen. She was waving her arms at 2 police officers, her words cutting the air like knives. And lying beside her, shaking, blood on his paw and muzzle, was Scout. I rushed forward, dropping to my knees beside him. He was conscious but whimpering. His harness was gone. His fur was torn in places, and one of his legs twisted unnaturally. My heart plummeted. What the hell happened? I demanded. Karen turned, her lips pursed in self-righteous indignation. Your mutt attacked me. She spat. He shouldn't have been off leash. I was defending myself. Mark cut in before I could respond. She sprayed him. Pepper spray. Twice. He was just guiding Ava through the park path like he always does. She claimed he was too close to her azaleas. One of the officers motioned for me to calm down as the other jotted notes. Ma'am, we're going to need a statement, he said. But I wasn't listening. I scooped Scout into my arms, trying not to hurt him more, and rushed back to the car. At the emergency vet clinic, they did what they could. Scout had a fractured foreleg, bruised ribs, and corneal burns from the pepper spray. He would recover, they said, but it would take weeks, maybe months, before he'd be able to work again. If ever. I sat there in the sterile waiting room, tears burning in my eyes, thinking of Ava sitting at home, waiting for Scout to return. I didn't know how I was going to tell her. That night, I watched her reach out to the empty space beside her bed, where Scout usually slept. When her hand met nothing but air, her lip trembled. "Is he okay?" she whispered. "He's hurt, sweetie. But the doctors are helping him. He'll be okay." I lied. Because at that moment, I didn't know if either of them would be. But the nightmare wasn't over. The next morning, I got a notice taped to my door, an official HOA violation. Unauthorized use of a non-registered service animal in community spaces, it read. Potential fines and hearings to follow. It was signed by Karen. Of course. I could barely believe it. Not only had she attacked a disabled child's service animal, but now she was trying to fine us for it. That's when something inside me snapped. What Karen didn't know, and what I had tried so hard to keep separate from my civilian life, was that before I was a parent, before I was widowed, I was a major in the U.S. Air Force. I specialized in defense strategy and emergency logistics. I knew how to escalate, how to fight by the book. And I had resources she couldn't even imagine. I called a few contacts. Quietly. Carefully. 3 days later, she found herself served, not just with a civil lawsuit for damages and emotional distress, but also with federal scrutiny. Turns out, interfering with a service animal isn't just a community dispute, it's a federal offense under the Americans with Disabilities Act. But that wasn't all. In her paranoid spiral, Karen had been contacting local authorities, trying to paint Ava and me as security threats. She had taken photos of Scout's harness and claimed it had surveillance tech in it. Delusional nonsense, but enough to draw the attention of a DoD contact when I mentioned it. They requested a background check. Standard stuff. That's when the real bombshell hit. Karen had changed her name 10 years ago. Her real identity was tied to an open investigation regarding fraudulent military disability claims. She had posed as a dependent to receive base privileges. And when the Office of the Inspector General dug deeper, they found correspondence between her and a flagged email address, an international entity known for cyber interference in U.S. housing infrastructure. Her attack on Scout suddenly didn't seem so random. Her obsession with our presence in the neighborhood, her paranoia about surveillance, her efforts to undermine us, they fit a pattern. One serious enough that a quiet federal inquiry was launched. A week later, I woke up to a quiet convoy outside our neighborhood entrance. 2 unmarked black SUVs and a gray van. Karen was taken in for questioning. Nobody saw her return. Ava never knew any of this. All she knew was that Scout came home weeks later, slower, gentler, but still hers. The community held a small welcome back event, and Scout wore a tiny medal someone had made that said, "Neighborhood Hero." The HOA board quietly removed Karen from her position. No explanation was offered. Just a brief, anonymous letter apologizing for miscommunications. But I knew the truth. You don't threaten a child, hurt an innocent animal, and expect silence. Not from a mother. And certainly not from a former Air Force strategist with nothing left to lose. Karen destroyed my daughter's guide dog. She didn't expect what came next.